Welcome to Driven. I'm your host, Paul Perrone. We're going to learn and talk about AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and so much more. Check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. So kick back or buckle up and become driven. Welcome to episode 6 of Driven. This is an informational episode and part of the How AVs Work Deeper Dive series. So we're going to dive a little deeper here today on a particular topic. Now, many AVs need maps. They need to know where to go, where they're allowed to go, where they're not allowed to go. So this episode is about what's in an AV map. Now, there's going to be a different format for maps across AV companies, and certain standards do exist. And the details that go into the maps can vary, but we're going to show some mapping elements by example. So here we go. What's in an AV map? Well, one of the first things to consider with respect to what's in an AV map are lanes. A lane is the fundamental guideway for the vehicle. It's going to have a width and a number of waypoints that it needs to hit as it traverses down the lane, through the path, I should say, to its ultimate destination. There's typically left and right boundaries for lanes. These might be yellow or white lines, could be solid or broken lines, double or single, no markers at all, no lane markers at all. It might just be the edges of the highway. But you're going to have a lane, right, which has a number of waypoints and a width for the lane, or you may hear the term lateral boundary offset, which is half of the width. It's the distance from the center of the lane to the left or right edge. So waypoints are absolutely critical here for a high definition autonomous vehicle map. While you or I might suffice with being told where we need to turn, say a couple 100 feet out ahead or even a quarter of a mile ahead, the resolution for what we need in autonomous vehicles for how to navigate, where we're going to turn, and how we're going to operate the vehicle in a precise fashion is much more resolute than that. In fact, we're talking centimeters, it may be up to a meter, but there's going to be a high degree of accuracy and precision demanded in the definition of where these waypoints are, typically in terms of latitude, longitude, positions on Earth. And you're going to want to be sure that these are accurate, that this ground truth is truth, so that you know where the vehicle is at any point in time with reference to an accurate and precise map. And a waypoint with a lane width will really just define a line, right? So you just can't have one waypoint, of course, and a lane width. You're going to need two, for example, to define a lane segment. 2 waypoints plus the width will give you some chunk of a lane. And then as you add up those waypoints and you add more waypoints, you're going to start to create a lane which may have a shape, right? It starts to take a trajectory to the left or right, and it curves in such a way as you continue to project the waypoints further and further down the definition of a particular lane. Waypoints also typically have identifiers and some sort of numbering scheme. This could be used for sequencing within the lane, but it also provides an applied direction perhaps, right? These are typically increasing numbers from 1 to 1,000 or however many waypoints are going to define that particular lane. And it sort of implies the direction that you're traveling from the lowest to the larger number in this example. There also may be some way to identify or number these lanes such that you can apply adjacency. Lane 1.1 might be to the right of lane 1.2, for example, depending on the implied notation. Waypoints are not only used for navigation by autonomous vehicles, but they're also often embodied with attributes that indicate some behaviors that may be required when you get to such a waypoint, such as the waypoint might be identified as a stop point or where there's a stop sign. It may be a point where you're going to yield to other vehicles. It may be marking the entry or exit to or from an intersection. It may be delineating the parameters of a parking spot or where you're going to be boarding or a lighting for a bus, for example. Now, there are lanes as they individually define the path of a vehicle, but inevitably on a road, you're going to have multiple lanes, of course. You're going to have 2-lane roads, 3-lane roads, 4-lane highways, what have you. And you're going to want to group these lanes. In these maps, you may have a certain group of lanes that define the same direction of travel, for example, and that they're adjacent to one another. And you may have additional explicit attributes that define the direction of the lane alternatively, either individually or for the group of lanes. It may be implied, as I mentioned earlier, by the waypoint numbering scheme as well. So you're going to have lane adjacency defined for the lane group. Again, this may be explicitly or implicitly defined, depending on how they're numbered. You typically may have speed limits for this grouping of lanes, like this group of lanes in this direction of travel can go 35 miles per hour, 25 miles per hour, whatever, of course, the speed limit is for that road segment. Now, intersections are another key part of any map. This, again, could be implicit or explicit in terms of how they're defined. Waypoints may be defined as stop signs or stop points, as I mentioned. They may be defined as exits from one lane to another lane or another entry point into another lane somewhere. A waypoint at the edge of a lane may exit or enter into one or more lanes to form this intersection. And then you'll have multiple exits from other lanes as well, also entering a group of lanes, all defining this intersection, right? The constellation of entry and exit points for all these lanes that sort of abut against this intersection define the possible ways that vehicles can travel from one lane to another throughout the intersection. And the intersection becomes, in this case, perhaps implied by all of these exit and entry points, or there may be an explicit designation that this group of waypoints that are all butting up against this intersection are this intersection, right? So you end up defining an intersection, whether implicit or explicit, and you also define or infer the lanes down which the autonomous vehicle should be looking for oncoming or intersecting traffic. Be it a 3-way intersection, 4-way stop-based intersection, intersections with yields, traffic lights, or what have you. By defining this intersection in the lanes that cross in front of your vehicle, or that can hold other vehicles that can be passing across the path of your vehicle as you're navigating across the intersection, all define lanes that the autonomous vehicle wants to look down for potential oncoming traffic. Now, I just mentioned traffic lights. There's traffic lights as well, and these may also be in the map. They may be automatically detected. There may be a methodology by which the autonomous vehicle just detects that there's a traffic light out there. But typically what we'll see is an intersection that is defined in a map with lights that are controlling that intersection. You may specify where the lights are, their location, their height above ground. There's different types of lights, whether they're just red, green, amber, whether they have flashing turn signals or what have you. There's also what we call communication-based signalized intersections that leverage technologies such as DSRC or CV2X communications. We'll talk a little bit about that and maybe in a future episode. These are all V2X or V2I type of communication methodologies that provide roadside units that communicate with a vehicle's onboard unit to tell it what the status of a particular traffic light or intersection status is, such that the vehicle can navigate appropriately. And the locations of these V2I intersections may also be defined in the map as well. Crosswalks may also be defined. You may want to specify where crosswalks are, their width, their length, their shape, if they have certain rules that apply, if you're to stop always if there's someone in an intersection, or if you're allowed to proceed if someone's just stopped and waiting on the side, still somewhat in the crosswalk or at the edge of the road. Can your vehicle go under certain conditions if there's someone just standing there at the edge of the crosswalk not moving, or if they are moving, of course, in the direction of your vehicle, you should stop. But these crosswalk map features not only define the shape of the crosswalk, but also maybe some rules that apply for the geographical region in which you're operating, that apply to how the vehicle should behave when there's somebody or something in the crosswalk. Then there's going to be different types of zones with boundaries, such as a parking lot, right? There's going to be an entry or maybe multiple entries into this parking lot and multiple exits from the parking lot. There's going to be a number of parking spots to find. A parking spot could be defined by just 2 waypoints and a width. One of the waypoints might be here's where you enter the parking spot. The other may be this is as far back as you can go into the parking spot, for example. And then the width of it, so that you know not to park too far to the left or right of the parking spot. We all know how annoying that is when you get to a parking spot and someone's parking in your spot or in the spot that you were going to park into, and they're just a little too far over into your parking spot. So hopefully with autonomous vehicles, they'll behave a little better, given the fact that they know exactly where they should park and where they shouldn't park in these parking spots. You may also have unstructured versus structured travel rules through the parking lots. That is, there may be explicitly defined sort of lanes in which the autonomous vehicle can travel through these parking lots, or it may be more open-ended and the vehicle is supposed to infer or figure out where to travel through the parking lot. It may be implied by the placement of the parking spots throughout the parking lot as to where there may be lanes of legal and a possible travel for the vehicle through these parking lots. Another type of zone is just an open zone altogether, a zone with some boundaries where there are entries and exits to and from the zone, like there are with a parking lot zone. These might be, in this case, these open zones might be work sites or off-road locations or just an open lot of some sort. So you're going to want to know where your destination points are within this zone. Perhaps they're mapped. If there's certain work to do or operations to be performed with the vehicle and to where it needs to go into these zones in some sort of mappable fashion, or it might be more open-ended. It might be just commanding the vehicle to go somewhere within this zone, and it needs to find its way there. There are no explicit or implied lanes. The vehicle just has to maybe take the shortest path from the entry to the zone to its destination within that zone and avoid obstacles along the way, right? So nevertheless, the map is going to define the boundaries of this zone, this unstructured environment, and maybe a few destination points inside, but certainly the entry and exit points to and from the zone. And then there's going to be more. There's certainly many more features that are possible to describe in a map. There's going to be features that you might define where what's called SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping, where you're going to define certain fiducials in the environment that your vehicle wants to triangulate against. In other words, it's going to see these fiducials and these elements. These might be sides of a building or fixed things that can be mapped in the environment, and the vehicle can identify those and then say, based on the fact that I see 3 or 4 or 5 of these things, I can figure out where I am relative to all these things and know where I am on the map. So that's something that we'll talk about in a future episode, but suffice it to say that there may be a lot of information required for these types of SLAM behaviors and operations for mapping a lot of features about the environment in the map, such that the vehicle can even navigate at all. You may also have traffic signs defined, road markings, bike lanes. You may make things more explicit that were otherwise implied, like the curvature of the road, for example. There may be clues about the busyness of the area or certain cautions that should be undertaken if there's, for example, a school zone, or it's a zone where there's a lot of deer that could potentially be crossing. this may be information that's also embedded in the map. There's really no end to it. You may also update dynamically with information such as road construction and detours that are inferred as you're driving in the real world and you see these things. You may update a map that's maybe initially statically presented to the vehicle, but then dynamically updated, maybe shared with other autonomous vehicles in some sort of collaborative networked fashion, such that what's changing in the environment can be communicated to other vehicles over time, and maybe over the course of just a mission, or over the course of a day or a month, or who knows, years, right, as the environment changes. So the maps can be dynamically updated. But that should give you a certain flavor for what's in an AV map. What do autonomous vehicles fundamentally look for when they're trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B in executing an autonomous mission? So thanks very much, and I look forward to talking to you on our next episode of Driven. I hope you enjoyed the show Driven with me, Paul Perrone, your host. Don't forget to check us out at driven.show on the web, and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. Thank you for listening in. See you soon.